We've just celebrated Shavuot, the culmination of a long spiritual journey that began on the second night of Passover, and for 7 weeks, 49 days, we counted day by day, moving from the liberation of Egypt toward the revelation at Sinai. That count itself quietly teaches us that Sinai is not an isolated moment in Jewish history. It is the destination of the Exodus. Passover and Shavuot are two poles of a single unfolding story. The moment of the revelation at Sinai is the Torah speaking directly to Egypt. It is a response, a correction, a reversal of an entire way of organizing society. Egypt was a civilization built around power. Pharaoh sat at the center or at the top. The question that organizes everything is, who has the authority? Who is in command? Who produces and who obeys? Human worth was measured by usefulness to the system. Sinai begins somewhere else entirely. It begins with a memory. You shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the soul of the strangers, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You know what it feels like to be reduced to labor. You know what it feels like when your life is not your own. That memory becomes the foundation of law and Judaism itself. This is where many people get it wrong about revelation, Torah, and even religion. Revelation is not only about God, it's about society. The Ten Commandments are the architecture of a different kind of civilization. Notice how the Ten Commandments introduce God. God does not say, I am the one who created heaven and earth, although that would be true. No, God says, I am the one who brought you out of Egypt. This is where the insight of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks is so sharp. He often returned to the idea that the Exodus is the Torah's foundational political statement. Egypt represents power without ethics. Sinai represents power placed under moral law. The difference is not whether power exists, but whether power answers to something beyond itself. Sinai is the beginning of responsibility. And the Torah is concrete about what that looks like. It moves immediately into laws, protection for workers, limits on exploitation, care for the vulnerable, rest for slaves, dignity for the stranger, and restraint on kings. Even land is given a rhythm of rest. Even animals are included in the moral cycle. In the ancient world, this was unusual. Most legal systems protected the powerful. They stabilized hierarchy. They assumed inequality as a given, as part of nature, and then they tried to manage it. The Torah does something different. A king is not absolute. A landowner is not sovereign over life. Economic success does not erase your responsibility. Power is always being asked to justify itself. And that is why, in Jewish thought, Egypt is more than just history. It is the possibility that it can return in every generation. Anytime human beings are reduced to categories instead of faces, something of Egypt reappears. When an economic system treats people as expendable, a little bit of Egypt comes up. If the political language becomes so absolute that the other side ceases to be human, a little bit of Pharaoh appears. We are not short on power in our world. We are short on moral limits that feel real enough to interrupt the thoughts of submission and domination. This is where the Torah becomes urgent. Once again, Sinai is the moment when freedom is bound to responsibility. The Israelites leave Egypt physically, but the Torah is concerned with whether Egypt has left the Israelites internally. Slavery does not end at the shore of the Sea of Reeds. It continues in habits, in thoughts, in instincts of control, in the temptation to define worth through dominance. That is why revelation is necessary. There is a line in rabbinic tradition that every soul stood at Sinai. It is a way of saying that this moment is not closed in the past. It is something that each generation has to enter again and again and again, because each generation builds its own Egypts. They're not identical, but they're structurally similar. They're systems that prioritize efficiency over dignity, that reward output more than humanity, and that make it easier to see number than faces, faces that reflect the image of God. And Torah enters into that world and says, not everything that can be done should be done. Not every exercise of power is legitimate. Rabbi Heschel once described what he called a moral eye, the ability to see one another, to see human beings not as objects but as presence. And this warning was that civilizations collapsed not only through cruelty, they collapse through indifference, an indifference that becomes normal. When that happens, you are back in Egypt. This is why Shavuot is more than receiving ideas. You need to receive a structure for society, a covenant, a brit that shapes how power is used in every sphere of life, the political, the economic, and the personal. And it is worth noticing that the Torah knows that societies require authority, leadership, enforcement, and structure. The question is, what will hold that power accountable? And Sinai answers that question by placing God and law above kings, dignity above efficiency, and the human being, every human being, at the center of the moral concern. So when we stand on Shavuot and speak about receiving Torah, we're speaking about a choice of civilization. And the Torah insists that it should be applied and lived in all the details of daily life, in how we speak, how we work, how we treat the vulnerable, how we handle money, how we hold authority, how we define success. Because in the end, Torah is more than what we believe. It is about what kind of society our belief produces. Every year on Shavuot, we're asked again whether we're willing to build something that looks more like Sinai than Egypt.